computer. Welcome everybody to Boston 9/11 Truth. It's Thursday, May 30th, and we have a very special guest here tonight, Mary Maxwell, who is an author. She has several books. She's an inveterate researcher. And Mary, why don't you tell us some more about yourself?
Okay, since we're in Boston, I am OFD, originally from Dorchester, somewhere between the Ashmont Station and Shawmut Station. Very Catholic, I mean Catholic, Irish. And my life has been split between New England and Australia because of marriage. And sometimes I bop back and forth, which is not good in the jet lag family. And my PhD and my law degree are both from Adelaide University, Australia. And all my court cases that I have filed against the government were filed here in New Hampshire District Court, and 2 of them were then chased up as appeals to the First Circuit in Boston. So as regards my talk for tonight, I did send Sue a couple of pages of an essay called Society Doesn't Have a Daddy or something, which is absolutely typical of the way I think. But since everyone got a copy, I won't try to go over that tonight. I've looked up a list of the court cases related to 9/11, of which the real zinger is the one fought for very dutifully by the Lawyers Committee for 9/11 Inquiry, called not Truth, but Inquiry. And I'll save that for the end, but it's a remarkable, horrible thing that the Supreme Court did not take that case when they were asked to. They only take a few every year out of, I don't know how many people apply for it. It's called petitioning for certiorari. And then you could say cert was granted or cert was denied, and that's all they have to say. Occasionally they give their reason, and you don't know who's, of the 9 judges, 4 would have to say, let's look at that case for it to be accepted. And the other 5 might be opposed, or maybe all 9 say no. We don't get to know like who was the dissenter and who was the concurring person. They usually don't bother to inform us, so we don't know. But we do know that 4 were not willing to do it, so only 3 or 2 or 1 were willing. And it is totally disgusting, but we'll get to that. So I'll start off by saying that the way I work the last 10 years at least is, and this has to do with conspiracy theory almost completely. What else can one think about once one's got on that side of the fence? And so I've written 4 books about false flags. And in each of them, I'll just quickly show the books. I used the court. What happens when a judge or a defense attorney says something? You can read from that he is, say, cheating or doing something completely against protocol. So that gives you information that you wouldn't know if you were just sitting there, you know, like watching Perry Mason or something. Oh, now that this side said that and that side said that. No, you can gain a lot more information from checking on what the judge is doing and what the prosecutor is doing. So my little Boston one, do I have to press a button to get onto the screen?
No,
do I?
No, you can just hold it up.
Okay, so say, Boston Marathon bombing, what can law do? And I can do a little bit because I am an amicus curiae in that case. How they ever let me on, I don't know. But I'm still on. He's still in appeals, the boy, Jahar Tsarnaev. By the way, I have a website called jaharcompletelyinnocent.com, which has a song in it called Jahar on the MTA, if you remember. Charlie on the MTA. I like to write songs. Okay, now this one is called Inquest Siege in Sydney. And I think I sort of stumbled into the hearing, the first one at Sydney, as usual, blamed on a Muslim, this time blamed on an Iranian Muslim, and boy, did they mess up the story because they said he was Sunni, which of course he was not Sunni, he was Shiite. Anyway, there was a fake case, and finally I sent to the coroner 99 problems with the coronial inquiry. Didn't get a reply. It's pretty good in Australia. They do let you send in things to the official record. Okay, then we have Port Arthur. I say enough is enough. And that was a massacre in 1996. And though I lived in Australia at the time, I didn't see anything wrong with the case. I was just like every other member of the society, thought, oh yeah, that long blonde hair boy named Martin Bryant. Oh yeah, he did it, sure. Of course, he didn't do it. What a joke. He's still in jail, just like Jack has been in jail now 11 years. And this man in Australia has been there for 1996 to today, 28 years. Nobody cares. Okay, another one, which I'm pretty happy about, is the human mind and Sandy Hook's unreality. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. I want to get to my other talk, but here's a new one I wrote called Get Up, Australia, Get Up. And it is sort of just a little compendium of about 20 false flags over there. So that'll do for now. In case I forget to say it later, but I must remember. There's a girl in New York named Mary Efrosini Gregory. She is a recluse. You really can't get in touch with her. But she has done 2 books way back in like 2008, 2 books on the microwave situation, and I believe she's got it right, and everybody's got to buy that book. Okay, so now to discuss the various cases that have to do with 9/11, I think, Sue, on your agenda for tonight, somebody else is going to talk about filing against the Saudis. Am I right? Somebody's going to talk about a lawsuit filed against the Saudis. There has been such an effort going on for many years. I don't know if we got it. Anyway, that's not one of the ones that I am efficient on to discuss. So we'll move to the ones that I am efficient on. All right. Somebody filed against American Airlines, and you hardly heard about it because they told the judge they were seeking bankruptcy, and they did, like for, a few days, they bankrupted themselves out to clear that case against them. And then they came back into business. I don't know how that exactly worked, but that was that. And there was also a case against United Airlines. That was filed by a New Hampshire lady, you may recall, Ellen Mariani. And why was she, and only she, suing the United Airlines? It's because her husband died in the towers. She wasn't saying he was a passenger on the plane. No, he was there. He died as a result, supposedly, official story, of, would it have been UA Flight 175, I think, out of Boston, that knocked down one of the 2 towers. I never remember which. And the reason why she alone did it was because the thing of the payout. Now, not everybody knows that the various victims got about 1.8 million each for each family. Sometimes if it was a fiance, rather than, if the guy wasn't married, but they had a fiance, she would get the money, or the son and the mother, whoever. And Elaine Mariani, since she lost her husband, she could have been one of the people that signed up to get 1.8 million, but she didn't want to because it came with a gag order sort of thing. You had to promise not to sue either the airlines or the government. However, as it turns out, she got her case in December. September was the thing, October, November, 3 months. She had it in already before this fellow named Ken Feinberg became the hander-outer of the, the compensation or whatever you call it, which wasn't from charities. Now, some of the false flags get a lot of charity work going on. But in this case, Congress passed the money. It was many billions of dollars, of course, to pay the almost 3,000 families. Anyway, she then still held out and has never filed to get that money. Though I think her stepdaughter did. Anyway, she lost.
Away?
Hmm?
Didn't she pass away?
Oh, maybe I haven't heard that.
I think she passed away a few years ago.
Oh, well, I can tell you this. Early in the piece, not as early as December '01, but maybe around '03, a lawyer in Pennsylvania named Philip Berg, B-E-R-G, he put out what I considered a magnificent RICO suit in her name. But later, well, of course, they lost anyway. You lose everything. I lose all the cases I file. Usually you lose it on standing. You don't have a right to. But when she put that case in, and later she said she divorces herself from Philip Berg, I don't know why, but it was a most fascinating case. And I, being inspired by it, filed a civil RICO, racketeer influenced and corrupt organization. It's an act passed by Congress, I believe, in 1970. And normally it should be done as a prosecution, but it's available to people to use if they had an economic loss. Even $1. You have to say that you suffered some loss. And once you would think, if the world was working properly, that once the case became known to the court, to the government, that then they would turn it into a prosecution. I mean, you pay Mrs. Maxwell, she wants 20,000, that's fine. But then you take the same material and, of course, on the incentive, what would you call it? On its own, the Attorney General could make a prosecution from that. Well, of course, they didn't. And by the way, whereas those other books I wrote, 2 for Australia and 2 for American things, there were trials in all of them, so I could flip through all the, paperwork. Although the guy in the Port Arthur massacre, this was a boy of very low IQ who was said to have knocked off 30 people, just like that, like he was a SAS sniper or something, which of course he wasn't. And he didn't get any trial because he pleaded guilty, but you should see how they got him to plead guilty. Anyway, what was I going to make the point there about not having the trial material? Well, never mind. Once I saw what Mr. Berg had done for building up a case, I'll tell you what RICO requires. And not too many people do it. It probably seems daunting. Nothing daunts me because when I see that something is legal, I run to do it just to prove that it can be done. Like I've run for president twice, just in the state of New Hampshire. Why do I do that? I mean, it wouldn't have a chance in the world, but it's possible. You can do it, and it only costs $1,000 to do it to pay for the fee in New Hampshire, whereas it's 20,000 in Florida.
Wow.
The New Hampshire people like this to happen because they have always been the first in the nation to have, what would you call it, a campaigning thing for president. And because they have it, they want everybody interested in it and build up all the excitement. So they don't kind of bar you out by charging a lot of money. All right, now on this RICO thing, you have to prove, I should say the guy who made it, who created it, he was a professor of law at Notre Dame in Indiana Law School. And I think it was intended against the mafia. It's for people that are hard to get. So a mafia man will appoint Billy to go and kill Jimmy. So you can never find evidence that the big guy did it. But they make it pretty easy to get the big guy blamed. And there have to be only two crimes involved out of a whole group of ones, including something as light as like misusing the postal system or even the email system. In Australia, that's known as using a carriage.
Using a what?
Carriage. they're carrying messages for you. So anyway, I'll just grab a book for a minute. Here I have it. I want to tell you about this guy. He and his friends, his name is Russell Pridgeon. He's a doctor in Australia, but he came from Zimbabwe.
Can you hold it up a little higher?
Oh, yeah, sure. Sorry. It's called Society is the Authority, the Russell Pridgeon case. And he was using a carriage. They set him up. It was amazing. He had a case against them, against one of the many pedophiles, many in Australia. It's like the specialty down there. So just before he was going to organize it in such a way that the little boy could speak, normally there's all sorts of barriers against information when it's pedophile, but he had the case set up. So just before, maybe a week before that was to have happened, thank God, and we're finally getting this onto the, no, they arrested him. This was in November of 2018 with a lot of dramatic, because the media was there, a million microphones and cameras to see him being caught. But there was nothing to catch him at. He had been constantly complaining about the pedophiles, and he started a political party called the Anti-Pedophile Party. So they had to get him, right? So they got him by accusing him of many things. The one that just came to my mind was the use of the word carriage, because he must have emailed somebody. Maybe he emailed me to report about a child, and you're not even supposed to do that. And anyway, after almost 6 years, so November of 2018 until this month, May, beginning of May, I correct myself, it was in February, he went to court. He's been to court many times, fighting everything, fighting the loss of his medical license, fighting, of course, the loss of his passport and also the computer, everything. Still haven't given it back. But they ended up, and I hope maybe this little old book and a similar one that he wrote, which is called Everybody Knows. That's Russell Pridgeon wrote the book, Everybody Knows. They couldn't prosecute him any further. They had to give up. So the prosecutor walks into the courtroom, and the judge is up on her little bench, and my friend, the defendant, is at the bar. And the prosecutor said only 2 words: "We discontinue." In other words, what do they usually call it? They drop the charges. So my friend fell to his knees, age 70, fell to his knees to thank God, because he had been simply persecuted all that time. Now, shouldn't have got off on the carriage topic. I should stay with 9/11. Feel free, Sue, to bring me back to where I'm supposed to be. Now, of other cases, I've mentioned some against the airlines. Of course, there was none against Osama bin Laden, since we chose, instead of to accuse him of the murder and try it, have some evidence of how he did it, and we couldn't have that. So we just went to war, supposedly, against Afghanistan. But do you recall Representative Ron Paul, that is the big daddy, not Rand Paul, and Ron Paul said that constitutionally, and it's written right in the Constitution, it would have been possible for Congress to write something called a letter of marque. So he could have said, yep, we can get that guy, and we wouldn't need a trial. You can go kill that guy. I'll find it later. If anybody got the Constitution handy, just the letter of marque. But none of that ever happened, of course. All the bad guys were totally protected. So because we couldn't hit the airlines, because everybody signed a promise not to, although it wouldn't just be a victim could have done it, somebody else could have done it. But if a stranger like me walks into it, I will be dismissed for lack of standing. That's a whole area in law that we got to fix. Then I mentioned that there were the RICO case and the whatnot, but sooner or later there was one, and I think it might have started out as a RICO, but then they toned it down, and it's called Rodriguez v. Bush. And that was a man who was a janitor. Does that strike anybody's memory? He was in the sub-basement of the WTC when it happened. And he was later given all sorts of accolades for helping to drag people out of the mess. And he went to, he filed a lawsuit in 2005, but he did it in Pennsylvania, which you're not allowed to do because Congress passed a law soon after the event that said anyone filing any kind of court case that has to do with 9/11 must file it in one particular court, the Southern District of New York. So the one he filed in Pennsylvania fell through the cracks because of that. And then he was told to move it to SDNY. And when he did, he probably didn't realize that he had to set out another group of summonses. Now, when I sued for the Boston Marathon case, of course, I had to send summonses to all of my 11 defendants, one of whom which was like head of the FBI, head of the Bureau of Prisons, blah, blah. And they are supposed to reply that here's how you file a lawsuit. I accuse Sue Serpa of coming into my driveway and pouring paint on the driveway. So I want to get at her. And so I file a case against her. I am the plaintiff. She is immediately the defendant. Now, of course, she can say, oh, Mary, I didn't mean to do it. Here's $50 when you just stop. Known as settling out of court. And that happens probably far more often than the examples where it really goes to court. But if it goes to court, right away, the defendant, the first exchange of paper through the court is, I file my so-called pleadings. That lady ruined my driveway. And then she answers to, let's say I said 6 different things, like she did it on a Tuesday. She can answer each of those by denying. I was never there on a Tuesday, whatever. And when she finishes her, whatever you call it, her defense, then they go on to more things such as bringing in evidence. On the first day when I'm telling my story to the court, and it may be a completely bad story, wrong, inaccurate, I don't have to show anything. That comes later. So this point about the guy named Rodriguez, he did send out his 13 summonses, and then please come over to the New York court instead of Pennsylvania. He did. And he forgot to resend them because after all, it's a slightly different case now. He didn't send them. However, I just noticed today when reading it, the judge did offer him until July of 2006, approximately 1 more year, to go and deal with that problem. But Mr. Rodriguez did not do so. And he got loads of attention. He was a big speaker, like a motivational speaker, but it was more in that he wasn't saying, although he said, I was down in the basement and I can tell you guys, these furnaces and things blew up before there was any plane hitting. So that's of great interest. And it's of interest in regard to, but I don't want to go off on this tangent, Judy Woods' theory that things weren't falling down on, it was explosions were everywhere. And I must say, I've lost my train of thought for the minute, except, excuse me, please. That when he was trying to say what he did, he was emphasizing like goodwill. Because he was Spanish speaking, he was particularly helping any of the firefighters to get money and things. And he went nationally to talk about, he became like a hero. So he is not really known as a false flag fighter or as a dissident. Okay, and I also noticed, in case anybody that's listening to this video and is into these details, which I am not, there was apparently another witness, maybe at that commission, what do you call it? The report of the 9/11 Commission. That may be where this little story came from about another guy named Mike Pecoraro, and who was part of the crew that serviced the World Trade Center complex. He was in the mechanical shop in the second sub-basement of the North WC Tower. And when the room he was in started filling with white smoke, he headed upstairs with co-workers and blah, blah, blah. And he said, even things that you 5 minutes before were solid iron things were on the ground, just rolled up like as if they were tinfoil. I say that because I know Chris Bergier is very keen on the, I have to give Chris Bergier credit. He knows his stuff and he is supporting Judy Wood, and I am too, but my support of her isn't the same type as his, which is, technical science. Mine is that I go along with a lot of her circumstantial evidence. But that little paragraph or two about Mike Pecoraro, Pecararo, can be used. If the fires, as the government says, came down the elevator shaft and did bad things in the basement, well, that can't be true if the things in the basement preceded. Okay, now I think we can get on to the biggie here. Do you want to open it for questions or anything yet, Sue?
Yeah, if you're ready for questions. Anyone have a question? Just raise your hand or and I'll unmute you.
Oh, to be unmuted now that April's there.
All right, Al.
Yeah. Mary, can you elaborate on lack of standing? I've always been confused by why the courts, I mean, just about, I think there have been, what's his name? Who am I thinking of? Whose son died.
McIlvain, I'll talk about him in a minute too.
Yeah, no, but what I'm curious about is how he has been turned down by, with the issue of lack of standing. And I don't get it because I think obviously he was harmed. I mean, his son, and why the courts can take that position. I don't know if you can enlighten me on that.
Al, the courts can take any position they want. Shut up. I mean, it's finished. They write it, they dismiss you. What can you do? You can go higher, but the higher ones might often just repeat that. So I don't think there is any decent, legitimate reason to turn him down for standing. They may have, though, changed the wording a little bit on why they were turning him down, and they sometimes use the word, he didn't present a claim. Now, everybody say, wait a minute, he presented 80 pages, what do you want? But it's a little phrase they used. And also, much of court decision-making is based on precedent, and how this works is in the case where I'm suing Sue because she ruined my driveway. Her lawyer will come in and show maybe a stack that high of previous cases that have something vaguely to do with driveways or oil or whatever. And it sounds like, of course, that helps that lawyer to make his hourly, billing for how much work he did to find those cases. But once those things are on the books, they almost sacred, and therefore early in the piece when the Supreme Courts or lower courts started using the phrase, you can't come in here for lack of standing, it just became the cultural norm, and they just do it all the time. But if you really think about it, as you apparently have given it some thought for Mr. McIlvain, it's just outrageous. They shouldn't do it. But now I'll use a sideways entry to this story of the lawyers committee, and that is, besides me wanting to get some money from Sue Serpa for that driveway loan, you also can look out and see bad things happening. Like you might say, we know that down at our local kindergarten, the man who works the garden is really fiddling around with most of those little kids, if you know what I mean. So I wouldn't have to be a victim of it. what could I do? Well, here is the answer. In law, I could go to the sitting grand jury in my jurisdiction. Now, that might be as small as a county, might be a state, or if the, now this wouldn't work for pedophiles. Pedophilia is not a federal crime. But if the crime that was being committed was instead something that has to do with federal government, I must go to the attorney, U.S. attorney, with my problem. But in the early days, even before 1776, so there's a book about Massachusetts. The author's name is Nelson. It's Harvard University Press, and I'm thinking maybe 1970 was written. And it's called The Americanization of the Common Law. Now, we didn't have a democratic government. We didn't have a constitution. This is 1775, say, or even 1720. But what we had was what came over on the Mayflower being the body of law from England. That's the common law, and we follow it. And some of it was put into it by British Parliament passing a statute, but normally it comes out of court cases. So if there had been a case saying that the mother who left in her will all her money to her 7 children, but not the 8th child, you know, someone having a similar problem nowadays could go back, find that case and see how they argued it and sort of modernize it. But in this thing of the standing, I don't know when it's, thank you for asking about it, because now I'm going to check more onto when it came in. All right, in the New Hampshire Constitution, now that was written, I know the Massachusetts one is dated, I think 1780. So I think the New Hampshire one is a year or two before or behind, whatever. And it specifically says, and some one of these days I'm going to use it, it says any citizen in New Hampshire automatically has standing if their state has passed a law spending their money. So if now we were to find that, let's say the state of New Hampshire is taking down monuments because of, you know, Civil War racists or something. Well, they're spending money to do that. So if I want to object, they can't say, Mary dear, get out of here, you have no standing. Like you didn't suffer from it, you know, you're not a victim. So, no, it's written into the state constitution, but it certainly is not written in specifically to the US Constitution. So yeah, it's a terrible problem. But now, in order to talk about McIlvaine, I'm just going to run down what did happen. And I'm ashamed to say, when I heard about what the lawyers committee was doing, I thought they were being namby-pamby and maybe even just killing time for killing time's sake. Because you know that does happen. But I guess it didn't happen, and I apologize. They started out by not filing a court case, but by making just a petition to the Attorney General in the proper area, Southern District of New York. And they go to the U.S. Attorney. That's similar to what will we have in Boston, let's say in Suffolk County, you would have a DA, the district attorney for that district, but they went to the proper person, which was the federal, that is the U.S. attorney for New York, for a portion of New York. And they said, we're petitioning you, sir, to allow us to hand our new documents, which show like the explosions in the basement or whatever, which show that crimes were committed by someone other than those Arabs that were driving into the planes and the building, some other people, and we have some evidence, and we want to put it to a grand jury. I just mentioned that this book called The Americanization of the Common Law tells us that in the early days, and there wasn't an elected governor or anything like that, it was the king's, you know, what do you call it, henchman or understudy was there, but you could go to that, and they would set up every year, every 2 years, a panel of 23 men, I think. and you know they were men, right? Called a grand jury. And if you saw trouble, you just thought you saw crime somewhere. You didn't have any videos of it, but you could go to the grand jury and tell them, we want this looked into. And not only that, you could tell them there are potholes on my street, or there is a bridge that looks like it's going to crack any day. You're bringing the community's problems to somebody. Who are you going to bring them to? Well, the grand jury had an obligation to listen. Now, wouldn't it be wonderful if everybody read that book called The Americanization of the Common Law? And we would find out that the people had the power. And how did it get taken away? Well, it usually gets taken away by statutes. For example, there is a thing called the rules, the court rules. There's the rule of criminal procedure and the rule of civil or administrative procedure on how the little bits and pieces of the cases should be handled. And I'm sure somebody was there in Congress. And you know, many people who sit in the congressional hall are not reps, they are staff, high-priced lawyers, and they know how to adjust statutes, cover these little things that might be needed someday. So anyway, back to Mr. McElveen. When the Lawyers Committee got up the idea of simply petitioning the U.S. Attorney who works in the Southern District of New York, said, here, we have some stuff for you, and we're not asking you to deal with it. We're asking you to hand it in to the current foreman of the current grand jury. Now, there's no reason for him not to do that. Well, of course, there is a reason. Certain people are protected, and if that stuff became known, they would lose their protection. We can't have that again. So they turned him, that U.S. attorney said to the judge, no, we don't want to do it. And the judge said, okay, I agree with you. He does, you don't have to do it. Wrong. It is in the law that they have to do it. So our friends who are on that committee, Maxwell, I forget his first name, and David, thank you, and Mick Harrison, they were carrying the torch, you know, like when you go to the Olympics, they were doing it. I want to interrupt to say something that touched me greatly today. I was out on my property here, and one of the young lads that lives around nearby, I said, I'm going to be on television tonight in Boston. Okay, it's not a television, it's a Zoom, okay, but still, what does he know? I said, I'm going to be on television tonight in Boston. And he says, please save our country.
Wow.
A little kid saying that. I said, thank you, I will do so, sir. You have motivated me. Okay, now back to the story of McElveen. This went in stages. I think the first filing might have been 2000. I better start the other way. In 2023, that's only a year ago. It wasn't even a full year ago because what month? I don't know. 2023, the Supreme Court said, get out of here. Before that, the second district. Now, Boston is the first district. There are 11 in the country. New York is the second. That's the Court of Appeals. You start out at your district, maybe in Queens or something, and you get turned down. You go to the next one up, which is the Second Circuit. I'm pretty sure that New York Circuit also brings in maybe New Jersey, maybe Connecticut. It's more than one, because if there are 11 for 50 states, they should have about 5 each. But anyway, New York definitely has New York. And our men, Maxwell and Harrison, went to the next level. So they dumped the idea of just using a petition. And now they're filing a court case saying, hello, judge, we want to get two things. Declaratory relief, whereby you, the judge, will simply say, you're right, guys. Under the law, they have to do that. And we want injunctive relief. That means we want to enjoin someone against something. So if I think my husband's going to beat me up, I could what do you call that? A restraining order. That would be like an injunction. I get telling him he can't, raise his baseball bat over my head. I hope nobody thinks I mean my actual beloved, darling, late husband. I'm having to make things up kind of out of the blue here. And they, once again, at this now, by this time it was the year 2022, the Second Circuit, that is the appeals court, the next thing lower than the US Supreme Court, said, no, Mr. McElvain, no other colleagues who was the committee itself, the Truth Committee, Committee for Inquiry, they were the plaintiffs, and I believe they brought him on because that would really stick it with the, he lost his son. He is a victim. No, they got rid of it. Now, when this happened, when the Supreme Court denied cert, I'll get to that in a minute, I was pretty shocked last year, but you know how it is. Other things get in the way, and as I said, I'm pretty involved in this Hawaii thing. So I didn't pay much attention, but because of giving this talk tonight, I had to look into it more, and it is an outrage. There is no reason whatsoever not to make the government obey. And we have a statute. I could read you the number if you need it, but you could also just Google for federal mandamus, M-A-N-D, like we order you, mandamus. During the Holy Week service, mandatum non dovos, utilicassis in vicem, secretivus. You can use a mandamus filing to say that mayor or that representative, somebody isn't doing their job. So please, court, just tell them to do it. And that is well protected in law. That's a thing you can do. And of course, our two boys, Maxwell and Harrison, wrote it up perfectly in that way. Now, I cannot say that the 9 members of the US Supreme Court said, we don't like it. And we want 9/11 real criminals protected, and you just get out of here. They didn't say that. They didn't say anything. So they really have not made a binding precedent for other cases, but they have let the whole thing slip away because when my Swinkle and the other went, having been turned down at the New York Supreme Court Second Circuit thing, they went higher, which is just to plead to, may we please come to be one of the few cases that you handle next year, please, Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court didn't answer. Okay. They only take a few cases. And as I said earlier tonight, they don't give reasons or anything else. So, and we don't know, we know that there were no more than 3 who were on our side, and there might not have been any of them, but if there were 3, unless they bothered to make some kind of public statement, we don't know which ones they were. I think they all ought to be in jail. That's my opinion. Anyway, after this case ended, I would just like to say something further, but Sue, it's already 7:22. I know you have other business to perform.
Well, Miles has raised his hand for a question.
Hello, Miles.
Hi, Mary Maxwell. Hello from Canada. I'm appreciating learning about the American Constitution and American law. Curious, what is your PhD in?
Politics.
I'm sorry?
Politics.
Politics. Okay, great. Well, and a bell is ringing when you said you're very strong Catholic, and I just recently have been encountering another Catholic named Thomas Merton, who was a Trappist monk, and the reason I've encountered him is because I'm reading this book, JFK and the Unspeakable. And then another bell rings because this word unspeakable is the same name given to a documentary about Bobby McIlvaine and 9/11.
Oh,
And so my curiosity with respect to the unspeakable is piqued. And what is this unspeakable? And I'd just like you to comment on this, because I think it very much relates to what you're saying is going on in our world. And this is from page 15 of the book JFK and the Unspeakable by James W. Douglas. It says, when we become more deeply human, as Thomas Merton understood the process, the wellspring of our compassion moves us to confront the unspeakable. Merton was pointing to a kind of systemic evil that defies speech. For Merton, the unspeakable was at the bottom of a void. Quote, it is the void that contradicts everything that is spoken even before the words are said.
just because.
The void.
Wait, would you just say that again? Start that quote again.
Okay, quote, it is the void that contradicts everything that is spoken even before the words are said. The void that gets into the language of public and official declarations at the very moment when they're pronounced and makes them ring dead with the hollowness of the abyss. It is the void out of which Eichmann drew the punctilious exactitude of his obedience, unquote. So this seems to me that this unspeakable is really what we are needing to attack, because you were referring to how this wonderful process called the grand jury is being manipulated and twisted and basically wrecked.
Yeah, forgotten. Yeah.
Forgotten. So anyway, now finally, can you connect how your belief ties into who you are and what you're doing today?
Yes, but first, before I forget, could you tell me in what year did Merton say those things? I know he's back in the 40s, maybe.
Well, he was, one of the things the book says is he was writing letters with respect to his fear of nuclear war prior to the October crisis of 1962. He was already prescient in being very concerned about the possibility of nuclear war in 1962, before the October crisis. His own Trappist monks, order of Trappist monks, forbid him from publishing. So he started writing letters to people and writing letters to John F. Kennedy, trying to can change Kennedy's perception or views on life and whether or not Russia's the Soviet Union is this evil, or are we the evil ourselves, kind of thing. So this was I could look it up, but I'm thinking it's from 62. I do have the quote here.
That's good enough that you said it's around the time of the nuclear war crisis. Yeah. I noticed today Paul Craig Roberts, and I think his website is probably just paulcraigroberts.org. He's making a big thing about the way we're getting pushed into war right now. He said on 3 fronts. So that's really important. You may remember, I will answer your question in a minute. You remember John Kenneth Galbraith? Now, he must have been on Kennedy's, cabinet, was he? Galbraith, a very tall man. So he was going to have his 90th birthday. I'm not sure what year that was, but I decided I would ask him to be interviewed by me. So I went to his house in Cambridge, and he had recently been in a car accident. Maybe deliberate. That's the way I think of most car accidents. And so he was on crutches and he was kind of a mess. But we had our little talk. And then as I was leaving, I remembered something that I hadn't brought up. So I said, I'm really worried about, I forget what it was. I said, sir, this is what I'm worried about. He says, don't worry about that. Worry about nuclear war. And that was like in the 1990s, I think. So, yes. Now you want to know what my Catholic has to do with it. I don't exactly know. I don't mean that I'm a practicing literal-minded Catholic now, but my community growing up was very together. All the parents and nuns and priests were all on the same page, believe me. And we just heard, the story, the Catholic story, and of course we took it in. By the way, the younger you get into a kid's brain, the more it sticks. You may think you could start telling him when he's in junior high, but really, if you start telling him when he's 4, so it was kind of big in my house. Now, how does this tie to what you're claiming? And I agree. I agree. There's now, I don't want to say an evil force because that makes it sound like it isn't coming from people. It can only be coming from this guy, that guy, and me, and everybody. We're all playing into it. And I suppose I would blame, I say the media would be the, now, I know there are individuals behind it who want to be in charge and not have any challenges from below. That's what's really happening. But their best friend is the media, who, as they say, go in for block and flood. Which is the more important, that they flood you with wrong information or flood you with just junk, or that they block the truth? Hard to say, but since they do both of those things brilliantly, I blame the media. But don't you think that in this year particularly, and probably the recent Israeli war is really stirring it up, people are really saying, wait a minute, have I just been given a load of goods? Do you feel that way? How about up in Canada? Is it noticeable on the street?
Well, I think people are starting to wake up to the mainstream media not telling the full story, that they're only telling the mainstream narrative, which in a sense is this unspeakable. The mainstream media are really the enforcers, the facilitators of the unspeakable. In other words, unless we can have dialogue and take positions, whether hot or cold, on a question, like Jesus said, if you're lukewarm, I'll just spit you out. He wants people to be either, take a position, get involved. And do you know the American sociologist Sheldon Wolin? He passed away. He passed away not too long ago, and Chris Hedges interviewed him, and he said he feared passivity, being passive, will be the downfall of civilization. And I think it's, people are slowly coming out of their dream state, and but I don't know if it's going to happen fast enough. It's my fear. So I would just say in Canada, we're not any further ahead than you in the United States.
During the truckers' convoy, do you remember that there were people, and this was a freezing cold day, of course, there were people lining the streets all the way down, just waving a flag or having the little kids smile. And it was like, really, the country had woken up. But Mr. Trudeau put paid to that pretty quickly. And they actually attacked the truckers' trucks. Remember, you could see that windshields were broken. Come on, how much would it cost that man to go, or how could he get there to get his truck fixed? It was just amazing, but it went, well, passivity is, for one thing, you saw the parliament, which about half of them were supporting Trudeau. And And the newspaper would twist it to say, oh, well, it was the noise was bothering the people of Ottawa. Probably they should not have blared the horns all day. I don't think I would have appreciated it. But it was as if people were waking up, and I've seen more of it all the time. So it's not going backwards right now. It's not going towards passivity.
Yes, yeah, that is hopeful for sure. Well, thank you very much.
I forgot, what were the truckers protesting? What were they doing, the Canadian truckers?
They had been asked to do quarantine. So if they cross the border, which they do all the time to the US, thanks to COVID.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Part of the lockdown.
Yeah, they had to be vaccinated to travel into the United States and vice versa.
It wasn't just
and so it was trying to impose vaccination on them, even though the majority of truckers did get vaccinated. There was a few that said, no, I'm not doing it. And there were other truckers, they said, well, we support your right to your body. And that's where that started.
John, what?
But I just say that our Canadian Broadcasting Corporation is like your national public radio station broadcaster. At a time years ago when I was young, I had a lot of respect for the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, but today, they're like every other, even other public provincial broadcasters. They came out basically, for example, saying the Russians were unprovoked. It was a completely unprovoked attack on Ukraine. You know, just declarative statements right out of the gate without any exploration about, well, what is the history, what led up to February 24th, 2022, you know, and Jeffrey Sachs, encourage everybody to listen to him talking to Tucker Carlson just yesterday, goes for almost 2 hours explaining, you know, all sorts of the history from, you know, that he was actually, Professor Sachs was actually present to witness. And but again, we have these mainstream media, even public broadcasters, completely derelict and negligent on purpose, willful negligence regarding professional journalism and giving balanced perspectives, both sides of an argument, hot and cold.
You know what? The intellectual magazines too, like the Atlantic and the something review. I can't remember the name of it. And the New Yorker, which used to be over my head. It's not over my head anymore. I'm sorry to say, it's way down there. They have changed their line completely so that they most blatantly tell lies. How can an intellectual person make that change? I don't know. Harper's Magazine.
Thank you.
Huh.
That boy on your property, and he said, please save our country. Mary?
Yes. Yes.
And I believe that the only people that we can appeal to for 9/11 truth are the young people, like the college students, and also any age people who are really internet savvy. But the rest of them, I just have heard so much bullshit from people the last couple of weeks. They still repeat all the false stories of October 7th, and then they're not even willing to listen. And I have a friend who was aware of 9/11 being a false flag right when it happened. He's very politically savvy, and now he's had a stroke, and he's in the hospital. And he has the TV turned up full blast. And so I have asked, when I had to talk to him on the phone, I asked them to turn the TV down. And he just turns it right up to full blast. And I say, why? And he said, well, I know it's partially bullshit, but I like it. So I want to have it on full blast all day. And unfortunately, that's where most of America is. It's TV is a new technology, and people just love to listen to it. And We have
And
to
that goes for
accept that we'll never.
sitcoms too. Pure entertainment, sitcoms, sports,
Oh,
even the
yeah.
news.
And
Jeez.
they're all giving a message that Putin is evil, for example. Zelensky is wonderful. You know, they're giving a very, very pro-Israel slant in the sitcoms.
Richard, you still have your hand
So
raised?
I
Al
have my
had his
hand
hand
up.
up first.
Okay.
So Mary,
I'm
getting back to the courts, do you,
Al, Richard has a question first. Is that all right?
yeah,
No, Al was first.
Oh,
I've been sitting here
It
waiting
was.
I'm sorry.
patiently, so I don't mean to
I
interrupt.
always hate to give any ground to Al, but he was first.
Yeah, nice of you to say that, Richard. I appreciate it.
Let me spotlight you, Al. Sorry, I thought.
That's all right. So getting back to the courts, Mary, do you see any future for the 9/11 truth movement in the US courts or in an international court? I don't know if you've explored if it goes any farther. It seems like it's a dead end on both levels, but and where do we go next? I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I have pessimistic thoughts about the international area. Call me prejudiced on this because I am prejudiced, but I have no feel for international law. I think it is very distracting. Kids who have like a big heart and they say, oh yeah, now we can help people in Uganda. Well, that's a nice idea, but that certainly doesn't work as a matter of law because you have to have a force, you know, police or something, to make a law happen somewhere. And there is no global police force, and we don't want one. That would be ridiculous. Police should be in their own community who understand who they're dealing with. However, this business of the ICC, even that, to my mind, was very cynically conducted. They started in 1998, and the US was going to be in it. Ha ha. But they weren't. They stayed in it to help the writing of the documents, and then they pulled out. And in 2002, it went into effect, but I'm pretty sure, and if you want to read about it, there's a wonderful textbook, but it's very readable by a man named Kita Cesare, that's his last name. Kita Cesare, a law professor. And he says that even when you think that it's country A is going to find that bad criminal down in country J, no, it still has to go through the Security Council, which is just the big five, which is really the one, because surely all the people in the five who agreed to the invasion of Iraq and all those crazy things, you know, Saddam has got nuclear weapons. Oh no, weapons of mass destruction. Whatever that is, under the definition, a weapon that'll kill 4 or more people qualifies as weapon of mass destruction. But when you look at who's hitting whom, in my opinion, the world is run by one man, you know, it's called Big Brother, and we don't know who he is. And so this going international doesn't mean that another country will jump in there. For example, when Mr. what's his name, Julian Assange, for about 7 years, he lived in the Ecuadorian embassy within the United Kingdom. Now, was Ecuador really standing up to the UK? I don't think so. The UK wanted that boy prisoned, and it was very clever to have it done by a seemingly heavy-handed UK. So I think they all operate in concert. However, in my little play about the Mikado, in case somebody wasn't here at the beginning of the show, I've written a play which uses the words about COVID that I am quoting this guy and that guy, McCullough and Magafuli and all of them. And then I put it to this very fun sound of Mikado. Like defer to the Lord I execution. And but I'm looking to get any help from people who are singers or orchestra or video makers or whatever. So if you want to contact me, my name is spelled backwards on my email. It's Maxwell Mary, and then LLB, which is my law degree, which is kind of a British law degree instead of a JD, at Gmail. Maxwell Mary, LLB at Gmail. I'm really looking for help on this musical situation. How does that answer your question? Other than to say, I don't know. I can't help you.
Well,
I don't think international is the answer. That's what I'm trying to.
I had a moment of thinking that the ICC, after they issued the arrest warrants for Netanyahu, might at some point come into play, you know, in terms of world opinion on 9/11. And it's a long shot. I never thought it would happen, but I mean, the fact that and I don't think there's any teeth to arresting Netanyahu or Benny Gantz or any of these creeps that run the Israeli government. But you know, at least it's a gesture.
But it would be graphic, wouldn't it? I mean, that would be graphic.
It
See them
certainly
put the
would.
handcuffs behind the hands of Netanyahu.
Right.
You say,
I
oh,
mean, if that were to ever happen, then who knows, you know, whether the world would turn on the 9/11 story as well. But anyway, that's just a thought.
and now to you, sir, you patiently waited.
Okay, Richard, did you
I
stop?
think, Al, that would be, I mean, you know, if we had anybody to do it, going after filing a case in the International Criminal Court would be absolutely fantastic. I don't know who has jurisdiction to do that. I don't know if it has, I'm afraid it has to be a nation that does that.
Yeah, and
As
the
opposed-
US is not in it. The
I know.
US did not join, yeah.
I know, but all of the cases that I'm aware of have been filed by nations, not by any other type of entity. So I don't know if that's the rules for the criminal court or not. But I think it's fantastic to explore the possibility of going there. I think that would be great. I wanted to mention, since Miles was talking about the JFK and the unspeakable, and we were talking about nuclear weapons. I'm a researcher and writer and about nuclear weapons and nuclear disarmament and activist in that regard. And I just wanted to note that according to my analysis, we're heading toward nuclear war so far on all three fronts: China, Taiwan, Israel, Middle East, Ukraine. They're all heading toward nuclear war. And in the current environment, the current time of history, it's only the losers that are going to use nuclear weapons. The US used a nuclear weapons on Japan at the end of World War II as victors. But now the situation is reversed. It's only the losers who are going to use nuclear weapons, if anyone does, in order to prevent their loss or to open up some possibility of changing events and not losing. Now, in the case of Ukraine, the US is losing. It's losing very badly. The Ukrainian army is on the verge of collapse. And because of that, now 9 countries have said that they will allow their weapons to be used against Russia, not just against Ukraine, against Crimea, which was permitted so far as part of Russia, but also against old Russia, the Russia on the border before this 2022 conflict started. So 9 nations are now allowing this. The US will probably go along. Canada joined yesterday. And Russia has made it clear that any nation that allows its weapons to be used to attack old Russia will become targets themselves. Not the nations will become targets.
Yes, they will.
So far the US is saying, well, we're losing. It's dawning on us. It's finally dawned on President Biden that the war is being lost. He didn't even know that until a few months ago, because his Blinken and Sullivan and Austin had been lying to him about what was going on. He didn't even know what was going on until recently. So anyway, so the U.S. and the NATO, they're escalating now. Everybody's sending in more weapons, and they're saying, well, okay, now we're going to attack Russia proper, old Russia. In Taiwan, things have changed there so much already. The U.S. couldn't defend Taiwan for a single day without using nuclear weapons. There's no other way to defend Taiwan. And of course, in the Middle East, either the US or Israel could be the first to use nuclear weapons if they felt everything was going south. And so far, everything is going south. Israel cannot defeat Hamas. Israel is suffering considerable casualties. Iran won the escalatory ladder in the exchanges that happened recently when they fired all those drones, cruise missiles, and ballistic missiles. They showed that the combined anti-ballistic missile forces of Israel, the US, Great Britain, France, and Jordan could not prevent Iran from taking out every single target that they wanted to, which happened to be 2 intelligence offices and the place where the bombing of the Beirut embassy, the Iranians that were killed in Beirut, was planned, and the airfield that the planes took off from. Those were the targets that Iran selected. It took out every single one of them. And so Israel proved that it had escalatory dominance with conventional weapons. It proved that it can take out anything it wants to in Israel with conventional weapons. And therefore, the only way Israel could ever do anything against Iran is if it used nuclear weapons. So we're as long as the West, so to speak, is not willing to concede to Russia's legitimate national security objectives in Ukraine, everything is moving toward nuclear war, and that's because the US is still trying to prolong its little unipolar moment in the world and is not willing to accept the multipolar world that is already in full bloom. That's what's going on. And how does that inform what we should do? I wish I could tell you. I don't really know.
Richard, do you have a question for Mary?
I don't. I just wanted to say my little thing about, I missed Mary's presentation. I'm sorry, my plane was delayed. So I was in the air and I didn't arrive in time to hear.
Excuses.
Yeah.
Richard, I'm not sure that
Be allowed
nuclear is not so important now that DEW, which is like incredibly complex, can be done from the sky without your knowing that anyone's up there. And I noticed besides the Lahaina fire, there were several other examples, including one, I think, recently in Amarillo, Texas. You say, well, that's the United States. Well, sorry, but Hawaii is also the United States. So who did it? Who did it? And Chris Bergier had an article that he wrote where I think it was he that did this, compared the, up in Cape Cod, where Biden was maybe being opposed by people who didn't want immigration, something. They had, Bergia says, there was 5 rental cars in a row representing state cars. So why should the state not use state cars? But they had rental cars. And each of the 5 had, I think it was the under the hood, but not the trunk. And the next one burnt out in the way that we now recognize as DEW because of the way the glass melts and all that. And in each of the 5, it was the front, but not the back, and the front, but not the back. I mean, it had to have been most perfectly organized from the sky or from somewhere.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, that's very interesting. What happened, Chris?
Yeah. I mean, can you guys hear me?
Yeah. So,
can
Chris, so if the
Yeah.
U.S. wanted to start using this kind of attack electromagnetic weapons on in the battlefield, well, how could they be useful?
Well,
I mean,
they
what would the
they
target
can be
be?
very useful.
Would they be anything?
Yeah.
Buildings or vehicles or
Well,
what?
they could dustify a building if they wanted to.
And they could do that from orbit or not?
Yeah. So 107 goes on record saying that they park a satellite 24,000 feet in geosynchronous orbit, and that it beams down interfering microwaves. And 107 is very, very connected to the upper echelons of our military. And I can send you the video where he says that. And
Okay.
but that's just one. Yeah, that's just one type of technology. I feel that they're bringing down the towers. They had these devices inside the towers to bring them down, and then parts of the towers that didn't fall properly, they hit it from above from the satellite. That's how you see the spire. That's my current theory. I mean, I might be wrong, but I think that's the best theory out there. But yeah. According to it was Thanksgiving of 2022 when Biden, he went over to Nantucket to visit, and he had to rent some cars. And then when he came back, the cars were parked in the airport, and then the whole front ends of the cars were on fire.
Yeah.
While the back of the cars were not.
Right.
And,
No, I agree.
I
agree with all of that. That's possible.
Yeah.
But that means that implies to me that these weapons are basically useful in the same way that a conventional artillery shell or a conventional bomb is useful. They can take out a discrete target. But the point is that Russia has such overwhelming dominance in air control, bombing, precision guided bombs, cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, these huge new bombs that they're using, that I don't see how adding some DEW stuff would change the balance significantly at all. I think the only thing that could change the balance is tactical nuclear weapons.
Yeah, but I believe there's an upper echelon of our military that's an ally with Russia, and where it's only the Biden administration and then those controlling them, NATO, that align themselves with the New World Order, the WHO, and all those guys. They're the ones that are pushing for war, and those are the ones that provoked Russia in the first place with the 2014 coup, right, where they took over the Ukraine, and then that's why Vladimir Putin says, I don't want the Nazification of the Ukraine. I'm not going to accept that. I'm not going to accept the globalists take Ukraine.
I'm sorry. I didn't
Kind of stuff with it.
You're breaking up.
But just let me just give my directed energy weapon. Oh, can you hear me? Okay.
You have 1 minute. You have
the Georgia Guidestones were definitely hit by a directed energy weapon.
Chris, can you hear me? We're running out of time, and there's one more question.
Inside to get my other router.
I insist that Chris Bergier and Richard read this book, Microwave Experiment, and it has to do with 9/11 too, and it is fascinating.
Okay, thank you.
All right, one last question and then we're gonna move on to the agenda. Maxwell Bridges has his hand raised.
Yes, I believe that you have a website that was talking about this where you were praising Chris's presentation to Boston 9/11. Is that correct?
I have a website which is called constitutionandtruth.com, but only the other day did I write this essay about, well, it was just to introduce Sue Serpa's video of Chris's talk from 2 weeks ago.
Exactly. So the reason I'm bringing it up, I made a comment on there, and in my comment, I have a couple links to follow. I'm in the Do camp, but I'm not in the Woodsian Do camp just because she doesn't have an actual explanation. I think that it was the energy involved here was neutrons, high energy neutrons, and some of the effects though that Chris describes are more from the side effects, the EMP. And really, when we discuss this, well, I just recommend going out and reading my article, and then we can discuss it further. But I am kind of standing on the evidence presented in Dr. Wood's book and taking it to the next level, because Dr. Andre Gisponer, although he has no videos on the subject, wrote a peer-reviewed paper in a scientific journal and has been doing it for years on this. So anyway, I'm just calling your attention to go look at the comment there and follow the links. Thank you. And then, by the way, I liked your presentation. It's been great.
Thank you.
Thank you for the insight.
Wow, thank you, Mary. That's on that note. I think we all, I'm echoing everybody's appreciation for your talk and joining us tonight. And it's been an honor, and I hope you come back.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Mary.
Very good presentation.